is a build for those of you who want to play in a similar style to the Striker set, but would like a little more survivability. I don't watch build videos, and I will never claim that whatever I have built is the best of its type, as I'm a strong believer in the fact that there is no person on the internet that can throw some pieces together, run the numbers, and decide what is the best build for your style of play. Instead, use what you see here as a template, and adjust it to what works for you. This particular set I'll be running through has a huge amount of flexibility, and can be very easy to tweak if you want more damage or armor, etc. And I'll try to point out some examples of this as I go. I'm not going to read through all the set perks or each individual talent description in order to inflate the length of this video, but I'll have these on screen, so feel free to pause at any moment to read through these. But in the interest of keeping these build videos as short as possible, let's crack into it. The idea behind this build is to have a good mix of DPS and survivability. Here I am running 4 pieces of Heartbreaker on the backpack, chest, gloves and holster. To get the maximum out of this set, I would highly recommend using the backpack and chest pieces for the additional max BPM and cold talents, which will increase the stacks you are able to obtain and their effectiveness. The mask is the Catharsis exotic for a good mix of extra damage and healing. The knee pads are the Overlord Armament's Fox's Prayer, purely because these are still one of the best in slot for damage, with multiplicative damage obtained through the 8% damage to targets out of cover. All pieces have been rolled into armor for the core attribute, well apart from my knee pads, and either critical hit chance or damage for the secondary attributes. With the pieces I have at my disposal, I get around 50% critical hit chance and 100% critical hit damage, but you can certainly get a little higher. Also, this is where you have a lot of flexibility. Personally, for my style of play, I run this with all reds, everything into damage, because in my opinion, for the higher difficulty levels, you gain dramatically higher value from putting stats into damage than armor. However, if you were of a similar mind frame, you'd probably get a lot more enjoyment out of running Strikers, as this will put out a lot more damage than Heartbreakers. But I digress. Like I said earlier, this is a template. Adjust everything you see here to find that sweet spot for your style of play. The primary weapon I'm showing here is the Kingbreaker named Assault Rifle, purely because this is the best example of synergy between its talent, Perfect Flatline, and the Heartbreaker gear set. Personally, I prefer the non-perfect flatline talent on the FAMAS, because I'm more of a fan of the high rate of fire. The secondary is the rock and roll named Shotgun. The purpose of this weapon is purely for gaining quick stacks, and with the increased magazine size, this will build those Heartbreaker stacks very quickly. From there, you can quickly switch over to your primary and deal the damage. If you are wanting to deal a bit more damage with this weapon, for example controller players may prefer to use this more often, I'd recommend switching for the standard ACS 12, where you can roll a talent more suited to gaining extra damage. The specialization is Gunner. I'm using this for the extra rate of fire, armor on kill, and the slow trickle of ammo that comes through, which is super handy when playing full directives. However, you may prefer to use Tactician for the laser pointer attachment that applies a pulse effect to all enemies that are aimed at. This is particularly good if you aren't so confident with your aim when trying to utilize the Heartbreaker set talent. You'll also gain that +1 skill tier, which is always useful. I'm using the Reviver Hive skill because I'm usually solo, and the Crusader shield. I'm generally not a fan of using shields as they feel a bit cheesy to me, but they can be very useful when you first approach hostiles and need to gain those initial stacks. And that's it. I'm more of a cover-to-cover player, but you could technically just face tank with this build out in the open, provided you're able to keep up those headshots, in turn giving a steady stream of armor. Like I said earlier, if you prefer that higher damage, Strikers is still a better option. But if you're just after a little more survivability, this is a great set. Just have a play around with the DPS to armor ratio and find that perfect spot for you. If I ran through this too quickly, just let me know of any questions you have in the comments and I'll try to get back to you. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers!
Piece of shit wristwatch. Watch.